I want to welcome to the program our friend, one of the great senators, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. You know, Senator Cotton, it was very prescient that you wrote that piece in the New York Times about calling out the military. And people seem to forget Eisenhower did it, and Kennedy did it, and George H.W. Bush did it, and now President Trump is. The Insurrection Act clearly applies to this situation, as I just looked at the statute myself. And yet you have many of your colleagues, Democrats, and many of the people in the press acting like what Donald Trump is doing is authoritarian, that he created the problem, that he poured, whatever it is, gasoline on the fire. This is outrageous, isn't it? The sickening comments these people are making?
Yeah, Mark, it really is remarkable that so many Democrats and liberals in the media are repeating the exact same silly words they did in 2020 about so-called mostly peaceful protests when you have arsonists and looters and rioters destroying segments of a major American city and illegal aliens waving the flags of foreign countries in front of fires in Los Angeles. And you're right, and this is the case I made in the 2020 BLM riots as well, that President Trump is acting well within his authorities. Obviously, we would always prefer if the local police can maintain good order on our streets, and they usually can, except in extreme circumstances. Sometimes, as in 2020, and maybe now in 2025 in Los Angeles, they're not allowed to by Democratic mayors. But if they can't, the next step, Mark, of course, is the National Guard. That's one of the reasons we have the National Guard, is help to preserve order when the police are overwhelmed. But when you have an ideological and incompetent governor like Gavin Newsom, who refuses to do his job to protect innocent life and property, the president is well within his legal authority to federalize the National Guard. And as you cited one example, Dwight Eisenhower, that happened in my own state, Mark. In 1957, a racist Democratic governor called out the National Guard to obstruct the desegregation of Little Rock Central High School. And Dwight Eisenhower said, I don't think so. So he federalized the Arkansas Guard and then used them to carry out the court-mandated desegregation. So the use of the National Guard is the next step. The third and final step would be the use under the Insurrection Act of active duty troops. That law is almost as old as our republic itself. It goes back well over 200 years. There are many cases in which it has been used when both the local police and the National Guard is insufficient. George H.W. Bush used it in 1992 during the L.A. riots. Now, the president has said he doesn't think it's reached that point yet, but he's prepared to do so if Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass can't do their job. That's exactly what we should expect from the President of the United States, is that he will fulfill his constitutional responsibilities to protect federal officers, federal property, and innocent Americans from this kind of lawless anarchy that we see in the streets of Los Angeles.
To the best of my knowledge, Senator Cotton, this is really the first time that the media have cited. I mean, 2000's another example, or colleges are another example, but the first time, let's say, this 5-year run, where the media have sided with the criminals, with the illegal aliens, with the Islamists. I mean, in the past, you mentioned the cases, the segregation cases and so forth, the media were on the right side, the correct side. But here they're on the completely wrong side, and whereas before you talk about the segregationist governors in the South and so forth, we have these so-called liberal Democrats, many of them in the North and in the West, who support all this violence and so forth and make excuses for it, no?
I'd say it goes so far as to say they celebrate it, Mark. That's certainly what they did during the BLM riots in 2020, and they're walking up to that line right now with these riots in Los Angeles. And I think it gets back to the fact that they simply agree with the political causes behind that violence. Like, look, you don't have to support Donald Trump's immigration policy. I do, you do, but you don't have to support it to say you shouldn't be throwing cement and bricks and frozen water bottles at police officers. You shouldn't be shooting them with fireworks. Where are the Democrats who are saying they oppose Donald Trump's immigration policy, but they condemn the attacks on police officers and federal authorities? They are nowhere. They are silent. And in some ways, Mark, these riots in Los Angeles are worse than the BLM riots. Those riots were at least American citizens protesting what they wrongly thought was perceived injustice. Here you have violent, illegal aliens setting fire to businesses, setting fire to cars, all while they wave the flags of foreign countries. And yet Gavin Newsom stands in solidarity with them and says that Donald Trump is to blame. Again, what has Donald Trump done? All he's done is enforce immigration law, which is not some obscure matter, Mark. It was a central issue of the campaign last year after Joe Biden's slow motion invasion by illegal aliens of this country for 4 years. The American people elected Donald Trump to do exactly what the immigration authorities started doing in Los Angeles last week.
And these laws that far predate Donald Trump's presidency authorize him to do it. So in other words, it's not like Donald Trump on his own has decided, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. He can federalize the National Guard. He can trigger the Insurrection Act. These things have been done before, as you point out, as I pointed out in the first hour of the program. And here we have a mayor who wouldn't lift her finger, and a governor who's a complete incompetent who won't lift his finger. And the police chief in L.A. just said, we're overrun. We're outnumbered. And let me ask you this, Senator. ICE personnel are federal officials, aren't they? The federal courthouse is a federal courthouse, isn't it? I mean, apart from the absolute right to contain a city or even a state by using these powers, the federal government's under attack, no?
Yeah, Mark, that's exactly right. You have a situation in which, again, you'd always want the local police or sheriff's department to be able to maintain law and order on the streets. The police chief of the Los Angeles Police Department has said his force is overwhelmed. That is a textbook case in which the governor of the state should say, okay, we are coming in with the National Guard to back up our police to make sure they are not overwhelmed. Yet Gavin Newsom refuses to do so because he is more sympathetic to criminal, illegal aliens than he is to the brave men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department. That's why Donald Trump had to take the step of federalizing the California Guard, something for which there's clear legal authority and ample precedent.
Senator Tom Cotton's with us. Senator Cotton, Iran, they have rejected completely, they said, the last proposal from the president. They're going to provide another of their proposals, and apparently there's going to be another discussion Thursday. Every day that goes by, these guys are dragging their feet, aren't they?
Yeah, Mark, I saw the president's comments this afternoon in that Iran has rejected what, frankly, is a very generous offer the president is willing to make. He started out saying he didn't even think they should have civilian nuclear power, but he was willing to provide them enriched uranium, as we do to dozens of other countries around the world, to have civilian nuclear power, and Iran has rejected even that. Why would they reject that, Mark? If they claim they only want a civilian nuclear program, why would they refuse to accept low-enriched uranium for a civilian power program? It's because they're lying. They don't want a civilian nuclear power program. They want the bomb. And the critical component of getting nuclear weapons is highly enriched uranium. And if you can enrich it to any level, even the low levels needed for civilian power, you can enrich it to weapons grade level. That's the one thing that President Trump has been consistent on from the very beginning, is that we cannot allow Iran to continue to enrich uranium. That was the cardinal flaw in Barack Obama's terrible deal. And as he said today, Iran has rejected that. And he's been very clear as recently as this weekend, flying on Air Force One, that if they reject that proposal, if they insist upon uranium enrichment inside of Iran, well, we'll have to do it the other way. And the other way means using military force to destroy their nuclear facilities. So I don't know what Iran is going to come back to him with, but I'm very confident that President Trump is not going to allow the Ayatollahs to tap him along the way Joe Biden did for 4 years.
I feel that way, too. They got 53 Republican senators, and 52 of them, including you, obviously, signed a letter that told the administration no spinning centrifuges. That is, no enrichment, period. I mean, you don't get any closer than 52 out of 53. And on the House side, it was 80%, a significant majority of the Freedom Caucus, the most conservative element within the Republican Party in the House, said the same thing. So I think everybody's on the same sheet of music, except some of these wild-eyed isolationists who don't seem to think this is a big deal. Did you ever think it would be controversial to say Iran shouldn't get a nuclear weapon, and if they're not going to give it up, they're going to have to be taken from them? Did you think that would be controversial?
Well, Mark, it's always been controversial with blame America first Democrats. I guess it's fair to say that we unfortunately have a handful of blame America first Republicans as well now, who seem to think that, like Barack Obama did, Mark, that the United States is somehow to blame for the tensions we've had with the Islamic Republic of Iran for the last 46 years. We're not the ones, though, Mark, that held hostages for more than 400 days at the beginning of the Iranian Revolution, or that has killed thousands of Americans and other innocent civilians in the terrorist attacks that Iran has sponsored for all those times. We're not the ones that targeted American troops throughout the Middle East. We're not the ones who, again, are running an illicit nuclear weapons program. It's Iran. Iran has been doing that from the very beginning. Every American president has tried to establish some kind of rapprochement with Iran, to include Donald Trump in his first term and in this term. And at every time they have thumbed their nose at America and continued to kill American citizens. And we have now a president who is, I think, going to put an end to it finally. He's not going to allow Iran to tap him along the way they did Joe Biden. And that letter you referenced that got 52 out of 53 Republican senators and over 4 out of every 5 Republican congressmen is because we were simply telling the president, we support you, we back what you've been saying publicly and privately, we will have your back all the way if you need to take action to eliminate the nuclear threat that Iran poses, Mark, not just to our friends in the region, but to the United States, because Iran is developing missiles that can deliver those nuclear warheads when they have those in the United States in just a matter of a few years.
Mm-hmm. And the majority of Americans agree with us. So this isn't
the vast majority of Americans. Look,
the vast majority. No
sympathy. Yeah, no sympathy. I mean, look, most Americans, understandably, would prefer to avoid any kind of military conflict, even the kinds we're talking about, Mark, which is kind of, say, the actions that Ronald Reagan had to take against Iran in 1987 and 1988 when he sank half of their Navy for mining the Persian Gulf, where our ships operate. We're not talking about an invasion and occupation of the country as you saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. Most Americans still would always rather see solutions and tensions resolved through diplomatic means. But at the same time, the American people have zero sympathy for the Ayatollahs in Iran who've been chanting death to America and carrying out that threat for 46 years.
Now, remind everybody, you served in the military. What did you do?
I did, Mark, for about 5 years. I was an Army officer. I was an infantry officer, first in Iraq with the 101st Airborne, and then I served in Afghanistan on what was called a provincial reconstruction team. And in between those tours, I served at Arlington National Cemetery with the Old Guard, where we performed military honors funerals for our nation's heroes.
And you've written about this, so they can't very well call you a chicken hawk, can they? You served in 2 theaters. I'm just laughing because they come up with any argument they can, these guys, and one's dumber than the next. The intelligence is pretty solid, isn't it, about what Iran's doing? We've got the United States, unless the Trump people are lying. I don't think they are. You have the Israelis. You have the Austrians. You have most of Europe. You have the IAEA with the UN. And then you have the Iranians themselves bragging that they're not giving up their nuclear program. I mean, they're confessing to it.
Yeah.
So there's no question about it, is there, Senator?
No, the intelligence is very clear on this, Mark, and it's not classified. It's not a secret. We're not discussing state secrets here. The International Atomic Agency Administration releases periodic reports, as they just did last month, about the status of Iran's uranium enrichment program. And they say that they've now enriched enough uranium up to near weapons grade that they would have enough weapons grade material for multiple nuclear bombs. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to detonate a bomb tomorrow. There are other parts of developing a nuclear bomb, you've got to have the actual warhead that can turn the enriched uranium into a nuclear reaction. You need to have some kind of delivery system. But, Mark, it doesn't have to be a missile that can fly long ranges. It can be smuggled across international boundaries. It could be put on a ship and taken into a port in Israel or Saudi Arabia or the United States. That's why uranium enrichment is the critical component of a nuclear weapons program, and that's why President Trump has been very clear from his first term. Really, from the first time he and I ever spoke, Mark, the first time he and I ever talked was right after he had announced his candidacy 10 years ago, and he thanked me for my work to oppose Barack Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. So he's been incredibly consistent for 10 years. We cannot allow Iran to have uranium enrichment. That is an absolute red line.
In fact, when he signed the document pulling out of that Obama deal, it was in his New Jersey home. On a rare occasion, I happened to be there with other people, and he called me over and handed me the pen. So it's framed on our wall. When he did that, I think a lot of these isolationists don't understand this is Donald Trump's policy you and I support. In other words, this has always been his policy. This has always been MAGA's policy, which is a Reaganite foreign policy. It's always been his policy, no?
Absolutely, Mark, from the very beginning. I mean, Donald Trump has not said that he wants to topple Iran's government. He has not said that he wants Iran to have a democracy like the Netherlands or Denmark. It'd be better for them and their people if they had a government besides the Ayatollahs. But he has always been consistent that the one thing we cannot allow Iran to have, the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism, is a nuclear weapon. And the critical path to a nuclear weapon is uranium enrichment. And that's why he's been so clear for 10 years, and to include for the last 3 months as we've gone down the path of negotiations to see if Iran could get scared straight by Donald Trump and give up their uranium enrichment, which they refused to do for Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And there's some reason to think that they would be that scared. Why? Don't forget, Mark, Iran tried to assassinate Donald Trump last year, and they'd probably keep trying to if they thought they could. That's how scared to death the Ayatollahs are of Donald Trump.
Some of the same voices that they keep talking about war, it's going to be a war, a World War III or whatever, are some of the same people that said the same thing when he took out Soleimani. They opposed him taking out Soleimani. These arguments, Bill Buckley made the case about half a century ago, are typical liberal arguments, that any time you actually defend liberty or promote liberty, you're going to create a world war, it's going to be nuclear war. And here the irony is, we're trying to prevent a country from getting a nuke that might well use it because of the Islamist mentality, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mark, again, you hit the nail on the head. A little over 5 years ago, Donald Trump ordered the strike that killed Iran's terrorist mastermind, Qasem Soleimani. It's hard to overstate his importance to Iran. It'd be like if the Secretary of Defense and the CIA director were lifetime appointments in the same person. That's how important he was to Iran. Donald Trump courageously and boldly ordered the strike that killed him. And you had a lot of the same voices who were screaming before and after that about how on the left and unfortunately the right, that this was going to launch another forever war, another regime change war. Thousands of Americans are going to die. What is Donald Trump doing? He sealed his defeat in re-election. And what did we have? We didn't have war, Mark. We had peace. Because, again, the Ayatollahs were scared to death. They pulled in their horns for the rest of the Trump administration, and they went out of their way to do nothing that would provoke Donald Trump's ire at them. That's, I predict, what would happen again. And if it's not what happened, Mark, if their retaliation does actually kill American troops in the region, woe unto the Ayatollahs who ordered those strikes. Because, again, Donald Trump is not trying to kill all of them. He's not planning to send 100,000 troops into Iran and occupy it and try to turn it into a European democracy. He is simply saying, we will not allow you to have nuclear weapons. And there are many ways to signal to the Ayatollahs, if military action is required, that this is all we're doing. And you should not retaliate any further, because all we've said all along is no nuclear weapons. You can continue to go about your evil ways inside of Iran, cannot have nuclear weapons to threaten the United States and our friends outside of Iran.
It's amazing. The isolationists I mean, the Iranian regime, it's a hard terrorist, mass-murdering regime, loves our isolationists because they basically speak for that regime. They don't speak for Donald Trump. They're trying to persuade and pressure Donald Trump to let them do what they want to do. That's what's so crazy. Senator Cotton, I want to thank you, my brother. You take care of yourself. You're a great senator. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. Be well.